You don't just see a Chirico painting, you step into it. You walk into a piazza and the shadows stretch longer than they should. The statues seem to be watching and the silence has a weight you can almost touch. A lone horse stands still in the distance, frozen under a sun that feels too bright, too exact. Mannequins sit in empty rooms, motionless yet full of expectation, as if waiting for something that will never come. The clocks hang on walls, their hands fixed, and the buildings loom like actors in a dream that won't end. And then there's the light, that pale, spectral glow spilling across deserted streets, turning familiar shapes into strange mysteries. This light sharpens the feeling that something is just out of reach, teasing the imagination, drawing you into a world at once familiar and impossible. This is the Chirico. But why does it grip us so? Why does the quiet of a piazza, the stillness of a mannequin, or the length of a shadow feel so charged, so uncanny? In 2020, cities across the world began to look the same way. Streets emptied almost overnight, cafes and squares stood silent, and familiar landmarks took on an eerie stillness. Walking through a city in lockdown felt like entering one of de Chirico's visions. Spaces built for people, but suspended in a heavy quiet, as though time had slipped away. To understand the fascination that his work has for us, we have to follow the footsteps of the man who made these visions real, from the sun-drenched port of Volos, through the streets of Athens and Munich, to the hidden corners of Florence, where metaphysical art was born. Giorgio de Chirico was born in Volos on July 10, 1888, a small port in Thessaly, once called Pegassos or Iolkos, and famously the very shore from which Jason and his Argonauts set sail in search of the Golden Fleece. Whether by fate or fancy, it feels somehow fitting that a place tied to such an impossible quest should witness the arrival of a future painter whose work would be steeped in myth and mystery. That day the summer sun was merciless. Unlit candles in the house melted in their holders. His father, Italian like his mother, belonged to that proud lineage of engineers, bearded, athletic, clear-eyed men with strong ethics and a love of adventure. Think of the bold, imaginative types Jules Verne so loved to write about. Engineer Evaristo de Chirico had left his quiet Tuscan town, travelling from Sicily to Thessaly to construct the region's first iron horse railway. The shadows of the Pelion, the whispers of the Chiron and Achilles must have filled the air around young Giorgio, seeding a fascination with myth and romanticism that would later define his art. Even as a child, Giorgio showed a certain determination with a pencil in hand. He wasn't quite a prodigy, but while other boys were just learning to read, he was already experimenting with drawing on whatever paper he could find. Following his father's wishes for a future in engineering, he was placed under the guidance of a young teacher named Mavrudis. Under Mavrudis' watchful eye, Giorgio learned the grid system and the careful execution of shadows, skills that would quietly shape his approach to perspective and composition. By the age of 7, he had signed his first painting, a galloping horse, a detail that seems almost prophetic considering the mythic energy that would flow through his later works. The painting was well framed and displayed in the living room of the Austro-Hungarian Consulate General in Volos. After the Habsburg Empire fell, its fate became a mystery, much like the vanishing echoes of history that Giorgio would so often capture in his metaphysical cityscapes. A few years later, Evaristo de Chirico moved his family to Athens. Little Giorgio, whose hands were steadily gaining confidence with pencil and brush, was enrolled at the Polytechnic Institute, a unique place that combined an engineering school with the Academy of Fine Arts. There, he attended classes under a motley crew of teachers, from those guiding students to copy prints in drawing class, to the more ambitious but often uninspiring live model painting sessions. Success did not come easily. At the end of year exams, Giorgio rarely failed, but he almost never excelled either, often ranking behind peers whose fleeting schoolroom brilliance would never translate into lasting artistry. Yet these academic years were quietly transformative. Step by step, Giorgio's mind sharpened, his taste matured and a poetic precision began to take root in his understanding of aesthetics. The city of Athens itself, bathed in its extraordinary light and steeped in classical ruins, drew him towards the romantic, enigmatic side of Greek classicism, a side full of shadow and mystery that would haunt his paintings for decades. Outside the classroom, he painted landscapes and seascapes at dusk, capturing that fleeting moment when the world seemed suspended between day and night. Some of these early works even found their way into the window of Mr. Rhodios, the city's only gallery owner, who offered a flicker of recognition in an otherwise dim Athenian art scene. But life also delivered a sharp blow. In May 1905, Evaristo de Chirico died on a sweltering morning in a room lit only by trembling candlelight. Giorgio was just 16. The next year, seeking both escape and opportunity, he left Greece for Munich, Germany. Still enthralled by Wagner, Berkelin and Nietzsche, exerting a magnetic pull on young artists who, like Giorgio, were drawn more to romanticism than the tidy rules of Impressionism or realist literature. Even before leaving Greece, he had discovered the 19th century German painter-poets and felt an immediate, unshakable affinity with their work. Arnold Berkelin, in particular, became a lifelong favourite. In Munich, Giorgio enrolled at the Royal Academy of Painting under Professor von Hackel, an ageing instructor whose own talent seemed as questionable as his memory. Giorgio spent 2 years here, and although the experience was far from heroic, it was formative in its own subtle way. The German painters around him, immersed in what amounted to a sort of muddled modernism, couldn't dim his curiosity or his romantic spirit. Like his time in Athens, academic success was elusive, but the lessons of observation and quiet reflection stayed with him. After completing his studies, he returned to Italy, carrying with him a growing sense of responsibility as a painter. He began his Italian period in Milan, working in solitude and largely ignorant of the contemporary artistic movements around him. Some of these early works bore the heavy influence of Berkelin, and Giorgio destroyed them himself, a testament to his exacting standards. Later, in Florence, the city's museums and the Tuscan landscape guided him towards his own path. Here he created early masterpieces such as The Enigma of the Oracle and The Enigma of an Autumn Afternoon, works whose poetic power and sense of discovery would place them on the same level as his later, more famous paintings. Just as Greece had revealed its hidden enigmas, Giorgio began to uncover the Italian mystery, particularly in northern Italy and the city of Turin. There, solitary statues on low pedestals cast long shadows across empty piazzas, their silence echoing with a strange, timeless poetry. Yet these paintings remained hidden, tucked away in a quiet Florentine room. The world had no inkling that a new spirit of painting was quietly taking shape, until after 2 years of solitude, Giorgio, driven by a sudden impulse, decided to bring his visions to Paris. On the 14th of July 1911, he stepped off the train at Gare de Lyon, carrying with him his canvases, his Savoyard enigmas, and a mind brimming with questions yet free from the dominant currents of the heroic modern art movement. In Paris, Giorgio began to paint with a renewed determination. He exhibited at the Salon d'Automne and the Indépendance, and slowly his work began to catch the eye of critics. One of his paintings even found a home with Mr. Sen, an art collector from Le Havre, signalling that his mysterious, shadow-laden visions were starting to reach a wider audience. But the real discovery of Giorgio de Chirico belongs to a delicate tale. At the time, Guillaume Apollinaire was the apostle of modern art, and it was at the Indépendance that he first noticed de Chirico's work. Some say Pablo Picasso himself had pointed out the young painter's canvases, famously calling him a painter of railway stations. In Paris, Giorgio had begun perfecting his profession as a searcher of enigmas, finding as much mystery in the Gare de Montparnasse as he had in the monuments of Turin. Soon those solemn railway buildings, their clocks frozen at 2 o'clock, began to draw attention. Giorgio met Apollinaire, reciting some of Alcool's verses to the poet, and Apollinaire, with his uncanny intuition, recognised the hidden qualities in the painter's work. From that moment, he celebrated and broadcast the name of de Chirico to the art world. Their friendship is immortalised in the portrait of Apollinaire, where, hidden within the image, a small bullet marks the poet's skull. A subtle prophecy that would prove uncannily true 2 years later during Apollinaire's convalescence in the Italian hospital of Auteuil. By now, de Chirico's painting was ready to enter the world of commerce, though courage and a certain heroic blindness was still required. Around 1912, this stage of his career found its guiding figure in Paul Guillaume. Guillaume, then just beginning his path in the art world, quickly formed a bond of mutual trust and friendship with the young painter, a union further blessed by Apollinaire's discerning hand. In Guillaume's gallery on Rue de Miramencnil, a centre of metaphysical energy quietly took root. Here, until the fateful August of 1914, Giorgio de Chirico's mysterious figures, the revenants, the looming vans, and the entire parade of enigmas found their stage. Paris, with its sharp light and restless streets, had finally become the home where his metaphysical vision could come alive. We've called that date fateful because it marks the end of Giorgio de Chirico's first Parisian period. The following year, Italy's immobilisation called him back to his homeland. Even as a soldier, a corporal no less, he never abandoned his painting. While waiting for better days, he explored compositions of mannequins, still lifes of geometric shapes arranged in eerily lit rooms, and other works that together would define his metaphysical painting period. The first public glimpses of this new approach appeared in 1918 at the Epoca exhibition in Rome. A circle of admirers began to form around him, painters followed his lead, imitated his style, and slowly de Chirico found himself at the heart of the Valori Plasticity group. In 1919, Mario Broglio, the promoter of the group, published the first monograph on the painter, simply titled Giorgio de Chirico. The artist's name began to circulate internationally, with reproductions of his work appearing in publications across Europe and America. Meanwhile, in Paris, Paul Guillaume, who during the war had staged a remarkable exhibition of de Chirico's work at the Via Columbia, continued to champion the young painter, even fondly referring to his earliest pony painting. Back in Italy, Giorgio immersed himself in technique, inspired by his favourite painter Arnold Böcklin. He turned away from oil paint, considering it too ordinary, and experimented with dry and moist tempera, egg tempera, and glazing techniques. Fascinated by the transparency of Botticelli and Antonello da Messina, he painted with painstaking layers to achieve depth and luminosity. To master the craft further, he faithfully copied masterpieces such as Raphael's Portrait of a Pregnant Woman and Michelangelo's Holy Family at Florence's Uffizi Gallery and Palazzo Pitti. Some critics misunderstood these technical exercises as a decline of his spirit, but for an innovative painter like de Chirico, such periods of exploration were always temporary and just part of the process. Armed with these new skills, he set his sights on reclaiming his artistic world. Paris beckoned once more. In 1925, he received an invitation from the director of the Swedish Ballet to design the decor for Alfredo Casala's La Giara. This was his chance to re-establish himself in the art capital. Once there, he began a series of striking works, sitting mannequins, horses, gladiators, and mysterious arrangements of furniture in vast sunlit valleys. He reconnected with Léonce Rosenberg and Effort Moderne and resumed his relationship with Paul Guillaume, whose support had been interrupted by the war. Exhibitions, studies, reproductions, and monographs followed in rapid succession, with figures like Jean Cocteau, Roger Vitrac, and Waldemar George contributing to his rising reputation. It was in Florence, however, that the origins of metaphysical art can truly be traced. Sitting in Piazza Santa Croce, de Chirico recalled feeling as though he was seeing everything for the first time. In that moment, the composition for the Enigma of an Autumn Afternoon appeared fully formed in his mind. Maurizio Calvesi later identified echoes of 14th century Tuscan painting in the church facade, and linked it to Giotto's fresco St. Francis Receives the Stigmata in the Bardi family chapel. The flying angel over the temple in Giotto's work seemed to mirror the enigmatic figures and spaces de Chirico would bring to life on his canvases. This revelation, this sudden vision, was the birth of what de Chirico called an enigma, and it would shape his entire approach to painting. His later depiction of St. Francis in The Descent from, or Ascent of, Calvary continued to explore this fascination, showing the saint with eyes closed, hand on heart, fully absorbed in the unseen mysteries around him. Even the pseudonym Angelo Bardi nods to this pivotal Florentine moment, the place and the spark where metaphysical art first took shape. Through Calvassi's research, we see that it was the image itself rising out of Piazza Santa Croce that became the source and signature of de Chirico's metaphysical vision. And maybe that's why his paintings felt so familiar when our own streets emptied in recent years. The silence, the stillness, the way ordinary spaces suddenly looked unreal, surreal. We'd walked through them ourselves. What about you? When you look at de Chirico's deserted piazzas, do they remind you of those quiet days in lockdown? Or do they feel like visions from a dream? Let us know in the comments below. And if you feel like filling a space where there's a disturbing emptiness, then like this video and subscribe to our channel. We're here to fill all your voids.